This is Debra Rue, and this is a special episode of Human Potential at Work. Some of you might have been following my journeys back and forth to China, but I'm very, very pleased to be working with Huawei, which is one of the largest telecommunications companies in the world. And they also have over 1,000 employees in the United States, about 1,000 employees in the United States. I know that they're located all over the United States, including California and DC, New York, and Texas, for example, and even more than that. Today, I'm going to be interviewing a man that I met in DC and was so impressed with his wisdom. His name is Tim Danks, and he's the Vice President of Risk Management and Partner Relationships, and he is in Texas. So, Tim, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Debra, for having me on.
Yes, I was really impressed with you, and we got into a conversation about rural coverage. And I live in Virginia, about 25 miles from the capital of Virginia, which is Richmond, Virginia. And unfortunately, where I live in the rural area, we don't have very good Wi-Fi access. As a matter of fact, people are shocked by this, including me. For years, because I work out of my home, I have been paying $250 a month for Wi-Fi, and my Wi-Fi is not very good, and it had to be, I don't even know what they did to make it work. Some kind of rigging happened. And it's always interesting when something goes wrong. The technicians have to come out and point it, and I don't even know what they're doing. It seems like black magic to me, but I do know that for people to assume everybody in the United States has really good Wi-Fi is going to be a misnomer. And it's very important that we all have access in today's technological world. So it's been very interesting for me learning about Huawei's history, learning about, some of the things that are happening between the United States and China, and also just learning more about who Huawei is and the principles of Huawei. I've been very, very impressed. And so I just wanted to start off by talking a little bit more about you, Tim. So tell us about you. How long have you been working for Huawei? What is your background? Just tell us a little bit more about who Tim is.
Okay. I've been working in telecom ICT industry for about 30 plus years. I won't say more than that because I don't want to date myself, but essentially I spent about 20 years at Ericsson, and then I joined Huawei about 10 years ago. In fact, 10 years ago next month. So I've been here for quite a while, supporting a lot of our customer services business towards carriers, serving those customers as far as the integration, deployment, and putting all that techie stuff together that you were referring to earlier.
The little black magic stuff that just magically happens.
Yeah, so I've been around for a while, and in my role, I've also adopted multiple hats over the course of time, and extended my experience and my expertise into risk management, cybersecurity, and privacy, which is kind of the space that I'm operating in now. So.
Right. It's a very complicated topic, what we're talking about. In my former career, I was in telecommunications for years. I worked for Verizon. I worked for AT&T. It's interesting. The companies I worked for actually don't exist anymore. They've been gobbled up by different players. I worked for Sprint for a while. It was Southern Bell. So I have a long line of telecommunications background, and myself and my father and my mother both worked for telecommunications AT&T at the during the divestiture, their entire career. So I come from a long line of telecommunications brats, as we say.
Well, it's interesting that you say that. It's over the course of the last few years, I think one of the reasons that Huawei has become successful is that here in the U.S. we've kind of let ourselves diminish from the scene of telecommunications. We allowed certain things to happen with certain players over the last 10 uh, 20 years, I guess. And unfortunately, it's put us in a position here in the US that we don't have an actual homegrown player. Like if you look, our wireless infrastructure is coming from either European or Chinese or other nations. So,
Right. And so I like to say on social media that I'm a global citizen. I'm very, very proud to have been born and to live in the United States. I'm a very proud American, but I also am very proud to be a global citizen and be part of the world. And we're so connected. And I know you're about partnerships, but
mhm.
the connection, the way we're all connected, you can't just easily say, oh, well, which some people are saying, oh, you're bad because, oh, because you're a Chinese corporation, which is ridiculous because we all are connected. Like you said, we're all connected in Europe and we're all connected with each other. And so you start trying to say, oh, you're bad, so we're just going to pluck you out. And there's a lot of Americans that are impacted by this.
Right, right. Yeah, I mean, the global supply chain industry for the global supply chain for ICT really is very, very integrated. Everybody's manufacturing in the same places. They're buying parts and components and software from all the same places around the globe. And so it's a very interconnected world. And to call out a company by flag of origin or flag of the headquarters doesn't really make a lot of sense considering how these global supply chains are so interconnected. And if you look, I mean, Huawei itself purchases about 11 to 12 billion, or roughly about 10% roughly of our annual revenue from American companies, goods and services, and that equates to a lot of jobs here in the supply chain. If you look at something like the Economic Policy Institute, it has calculators for impact on supply chain, and 11 to 12 billion is somewhere between 40 and 50,000 jobs in the supply here in the U.S. So that's a lot.
It is a lot, and it's scary that some of the decisions that we're making, our government is making in the United States, is so negatively impacting the American people, the farmers, and
Mhm.
it's really hard to watch it and to say, okay, well now we've decided that let's close our borders and let's just we'll just stick to our. It doesn't work that way. We're part of this beautiful planet, and there's all of the work we do is about diversity. We really work hard to make sure that people with disabilities are included and that other disenfranchised groups are included in everything, in technology and everything that's happening in the world. And it's really troubling to see some of the trends that are happening, and that and we don't understand the impact. Because one thing I worry about a lot of things, Tim, but one thing that I worry about is if Huawei does have to stop doing business in the United States and stop having to do business with partners, not only is this really going to hurt the United States and so many people, as you just eloquently noted, in the United States, but when the United States wakes up and we're like, oh, okay, we were just kidding. We're not really going to, sever ties and hurt ourselves. Huawei's not going to then turn around and go, oh, well, let us go back in, throw away the partners that we had to pick
Right.
because you kicked us out. There is going to be major, major ongoing impact to the United States, and that definitely gives me a stomach ache.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's a long term. These are short term decisions impacting the long term economic and security infrastructure. I mean, essentially, you know, together we are all stronger as society. As a society, together we're stronger. If we're working together on security to improve and protect from the bad guys, then we're going to do it a lot better if we're collaborating, working together, sharing information and knowledge, and so on. So disconnecting is not good. However, as a business, Huawei will needs to continue to survive.
Mhm.
So as you say, we're going to have to make supply chain decisions. We've had a risk management program in place for a long time in Huawei. And in anticipation of what could potentially happen with any situation, whether it's a natural disaster cuts off a supply chain or something like what's going on here with the U.S. But essentially, some of that business may never come back. if you look at our 5G product line for infrastructure, we've already restructured to exclude American products and components. So we're continuing to build our 5G base stations. We've shipped over 400,000, close to 500,000 now this year, and now they're no longer including American-made components and software. So
Oh, that must be so hard for you to say it. It's
mhm.
certainly hard for me to hear it. And it just seems very, very short-sighted by a few people that I don't even know what they're doing, but I really hate that they're hurting all of us in these decisions that they're making. There's going to be long-term, problems with this. And it almost feels to me, as I remember when Huawei reached out to me and invited me to come and not they weren't trying to convince me of anything, but they just wanted to really, show us what they had done. And I was so impressed. I keep being so impressed. And something that surprised me was how Huawei even started, because Huawei started by supporting rural communities in China that did not have access to Wi-Fi. And if you don't have the internet, it's really hard to really truly be involved in this technological world that we're part of. And most providers did not want, it's not that they didn't want to help the rural areas, but they just couldn't afford to help. And yet Huawei went in there and did that. And then not only did they do that in China, they have done it all over the world, including in the United States. And I was wondering if you'd talk a little bit about that, because that's where y'all started.
Yeah, I mean, rural support or rural is really where is part of the roots of Huawei. If we look back in the early 80s in China, there was less than two phone lines, and this is not even wireless. This is real phone lines or landline. There was only two lines per 1,000 people. So, and that's an incredible statistic. And Huawei spent the first 15 years of its existence supporting and focusing on rural China, understanding the needs, the cost constraints in the rural areas. Finding solutions that work for the customers, and then helping to address those issues. And then we've extended that as we've gone into other countries and we globalized and started our globalization efforts in the early 2000s, going to places, developing countries and starting to do, smaller countries and so on. And then, in about 2010, we were starting to work a lot with uh, rural customers in the U.S. and starting to provide, infrastructure at costs that they could afford, and with flexible services and solutions that were scalable to the smaller levels. Um, from a perspective of a vendor, the vendor oftentimes the main focus is about scaling up, starting from a certain level and scaling up to support big customers. But in Huawei's case, we always were able to look at how we could scale back and scale down to smaller to support the rural customers. I give you a great example. A couple of years ago, we did a project in Belize, and it's a small country, primarily English speaking, in the middle of Central America, and they when they started their network, both wireline and wireless, was ranked number 49 or 50 out of all the Caribbean nations. It was ranked at the bottom of the Caribbean nations as far as performance. Now they're in the top three, and I think they're maybe number one now. It's incredible.
Wow.
And that's a
Wow.
project that we basically implemented, and they've got our equipment end to end. But it's really increased the dynamics of the country and the accessibility to as you say, the internet, the ability to understand education, hospitals. All of these things are impacted by getting access to the internet. And I think it's a real education that we need to make sure that our policymakers are understanding what the impacts are.
The impacts today and moving forward.
Yes.
And I know that whenever the UN and Red Cross and other organizations come in to help people that get in trouble in refugee situations, they used to ask them, what can we do? How can we help? And comments were, we need clothes, we need, we need housing, we need food, we need clean water. Now, when they come and ask, of course they need those things, but they also want Wi-Fi. Give me Wi-Fi, because most of them will have some kind of technology, or give me the technology too. And that is their way out. If they can get on the internet, they can help themselves more than waiting for somebody to come and help them. So it is so critical to survival these days to have access to the internet. If you really want to improve the life for yourself and your family and others around you, the internet, having access to Wi-Fi is real. It's just critical today in this technological age that we live in.
Yeah.
And with artificial intelligence coming, it's even more so. It is critical. And I look at, I'm sure there's been some maybe fussing going on, but it seems like 5G is a thing that's catching the lightning rods. Why? Why is I mean, I understand how amazing 5G is, why we need it, and maybe you could talk a little bit about that, but why has 5G created so much heartburn for the United States, to the point that we're even, which I don't like this either, we're bullying, and those are my words, but other countries, and saying, no, don't use their don't use their 5G, don't use Huawei's 5G. We've actually put quite a bit of pressure on a few other countries, and that I don't, it's like, so we're not even looking at it from US lens. We're putting pressure on other countries to also say, no, you can't use Huawei's 5G, which confuses me as an American, because one thing that I have been taught since I was born was that we're a capitalist country, and I'm good with that, and we're free trade. So from all of the studies that I've done, it almost looks like the reason why we're doing it in the United States is because we're afraid of the competition. And I would hope that's not true, because that sort of goes against everything capitalism stands for, and free trade.
Well, I mean, certainly, I think your last point there is well taken. I think that's where I believe, anyways, that a lot of the focus is, unfortunately. But I think that 5G ultimately is going to bring connections, super high speed, low latency, massive machine type communications towards a variety of different things. We're going to start seeing millions and billions more devices connected, and that brings some concerns from industry and government and so on, about what does that mean. Obviously there's great potential there to do great things, but there's some concern about how is this going to be secure. Well, fundamentally, 5G has all the security considerations of the previous generations, the 3G, 4G. All of those things are in it. Plus, 5G also has additional enhancements which improve on the security of the system and so on. And even further, as we get into the next iterations of 5G, like, of course, it comes in phases, but as that comes along, we'll see even more and more. And Huawei is part of all these standards bodies and groups contributing to the security measures and the security standards, working internationally with hundreds of other companies, including our competitors, direct competitors and non-direct competitors, our partners, our industry, and so on, to come up with the standards to improve this. So I think the challenges that we face are not so much with the 5G infrastructure itself, but more with the lack of security in the end devices. So these millions upon billions of small devices, small, cheap, or inexpensive devices that are being connected on the ends, I think that's where the bigger risks are, what we call the end points, or those small little things on the end, because they're mass produced at a very low cost with very little consideration for security, and then one of those gets breached, and then that can actually cause issues down the road.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Human Potential at Work. Join us as the conversation continues in the next episode.